Good afternoon, class. My name is Kyla Watterson, and I'm about to take on the task of explaining how Emerald Fennell's 2021 film, Promising Young Woman, subverts rape revenge films of the past while still tackling the topic of rape culture head on. Today, I will be focusing on a few key choices that the director Fennell makes with her film that sets it apart from films that depict the same subject matter. In this, I would like to answer one question. How does Emerald Fennell make the rape revenge film digestible while remaining respectful to its intentions of calling out rape culture? Before diving into this film, we must talk about what came before. Countless films have dabbled into the uh, sexual assault victim turned vigilante narrative, yet there are few that stand out among the rest or stand out from the rest. Alrighty, good afternoon, class. My name is Kyla Watterson, and today I will be taking on the task of explaining how Emerald Fennell's 2021 film, Promising Young Woman, subverts rape revenge films of the past while still tackling the topic of rape culture head on. Today, I'll be focusing on a few key choices that the director Emerald Fennell makes with her film that sets it apart from films that depict this same subject matter. In this, I would like to answer one question. How does Emerald Fennell make the rape revenge film digestible while still remaining respectful to its intentions of calling out rape culture? Before diving into this film, we must first talk about the films that came before. Countless films have dabbled in the sexual assault victim turned vigilante narrative, yet there are few that stand out the most. Through my research of famous rape revenge films, these few films whose names were repeated again and again. And I would also like to just give a shout out to the YouTuber Princess Weeks that our professor actually recommended for us. She did a great video on this and actually prevented me from having to watch all four of these movies because, as I will explain to you, these movies are absolutely horrific in their depiction of sexual assault. And I'm just thankful that I did not have to watch them. Okay, so the first film I want to talk about is Wes Craven's 1972 film, Last House on the Left. This film centers on the teenagers Marie and Phyllis, who are brutally raped and killed by a family of fugitives. Through some trickery, the fugitives end up staying with Marie's family. The fugitives are caught talking about the murders and then are brutally killed one by Marie's parents. This film remains to be viewed as highly controversial due to its several violently explicit scenes of sexual assault. Another film that experiences the same critiques is Meyer Zarki's 1978 film, I Spit on Your Grave. This film follows a series of events that a fiction writer, Jennifer Hill, takes to enact revenge against the four men that raped her and left her for dead. This film is infamously known for its horrifically brutal assault scene that runs for over 20 minutes long. This is probably what stands out as the biggest difference between Fennell's film and those that came before Promising Young Woman. She doesn't use the gratuitous, horrific gore of the other rape revenge films. Fennell knows it's not necessary to explain the horrors of sexual assault. Instead, she seeks to illustrate the horror of the familiar, but more on this soon. Yet she also knew it was important to put a woman at the center of the film while making the choice to not have it be the victim. It had to be Cassie fighting for Nina, not her brother or father or her boyfriend or whoever. The final predecessor to Promising Young Woman I would like to note is Ridley Scott's 1991 film, Thelma and Louise, which depicts the running away of two women after one of them is raped and kills her attacker. Fennell actually uses a similar ending to this film. She kills off her two protagonists to represent the realistic tragedy of the situation. There are no winners when injustice prevails. However, in her film, rather than the two going out in a blaze of glory like Thelma and Louise, Nina and Cassie's death are separated by several years and each die without one another. So why does Fennell make these choices? In fact, why did she want to make this film? First, let's talk about her choice of having Cassie be the central character rather than Nina. In an interview with the British Film Institute, she states, quote, "Often in these movies, it's a daughter or sister that people, mostly men, are avenging. But in my experience, some of the closest relationships are female friendships. And if you grew up with somebody and you've been best friends since you were 4, it can be the most important relationship in your life. But if you lose them, there's no word for it. You're not a widow, you're not an orphan. Also, because it happened a while ago, the grief and anger has moved away from where it was before. It's grown harder and toughened. Cassie is doing it for Nina, but she's also doing it to try and forgive herself. It's more of a personal journey than she is willing to admit, and how guilty she feels is bound up in why she does it. End quote. While quite controversially, Fennel chooses to shift the focus from the victim to her best friend. It is done quite consciously. It is all it is all too familiar story of the victim who is blamed and ridiculed for their assault to the point where they see there is no other way out. While it is fair to critique the choice that Fennel makes, she makes it still seeking to explain the radiating effects of sexual assault from the female perspective. Fennel also uses the character of Cassie to elaborate on the performative nature women take in order to appear as normal and appease those around them. As Fennel says when asked about her hyper-feminine aesthetic, quote, on a broader level, it's presenting itself as innocuous, fun and fluffy because it's those things we don't take seriously. These are things we associate with lightness, happiness, sexiness, and playfulness. But there's absolutely no reason to me why you couldn't feel murderous rage. Cassie knows how to communicate innocence, and she knows how to hide her rage. It's a way I think a lot of women hide their rage. People don't ask if you're okay if you brushed your hair and plaited it beautifully. They ask if you're okay if you're wearing your pajamas outside and you haven't washed your hair in 2 weeks. But Cassie doesn't want anyone to ask if she's okay. You feel it so much in Carrie's performance, referring to Carrie Mulligan, the actress that plays the lead Cassie. Because while Cassie's promise is now in the past, she's still presenting as a promising young woman. Partly because people don't respect women in pink jumpers, but partly also because, like all addicts, she's an expert at hiding. In this, she touches on something that I felt the very first time I watched this back in 2021, and I felt it again upon rewatching this film. This film is steaming with rage. It lies just below the surface and is only represented physically by Cassie and by her trying to hide it in her daily life. What makes the film so great as it can be hard to notice from the aforementioned pink, bright, and blue aesthetic and the hyperpop set list, Fennel convinces you for over half the movie that this is a romance film. Fennel enraptures you throughout the film, only to remind you that this is not a fairy tale and there is not going to be any knights in shining armor. Which brings me to the next point, the casting. Oh my God, this film is stacked. Watching this film again, I was surprised about the cameos that I forgot from watching it the first time. We've got to give a round of applause to the casting director, Lindsey Graham. She absolutely killed it. To name a few, this film boasts names such as ever so quirky comedians Bo Burnham, Alison Brie from Community, Max Greenfield from New Girl, Christopher Mintz from Superbad, former heartthrob Adam Brody, Connie Britton from was it Friday Night Lights, and the icon that is Jennifer Coolidge. And my personal favorite cameo is Mr. Freaking Krabs, Clancy Brown, who plays Cassie's dad. But why? Don't get me wrong, Carrie Mulligan is an established dramatic actress in her own right, but standing next to any of these castmates, she's easily outshined. It's established in the film that Cassie was not popular. The only one that recognizes her throughout the entire film is Ryan. She weaponizes this, to become a chameleon to adapt to her mission, but also she is an outcast. All of her classmates have grown up to be rich, uppity adults, while Cassie is the only one that feels normal, yet the audience struggles to understand who she is. The casting is made to make Cassie feel like the other, but it is also done to betray the audience. Which brings me to my next point. The danger of falling for the facade of the nice guy and the betrayal of Schmidt and McLovin. Each one of Cassie's former classmates are revealed to have played a role in the assault and or death of Nina. Her main attackers are all played by actors we have previously seen in lovable roles, even the women in our life. Alison Brie and Connie Britton's characters prove to be treacherous to her and choose the sides of the assaulters. Fennel and Graham weaponize the memories we have of these actors and their characters they have played before against the audience. It's as if to say, see how you didn't want to believe it. These characters serve as a reminder that the nice guy act truly is just an act, and we've fallen for it once again. Okay, now on to real life inspiration of the film. The title, Promising Young Woman, comes of course from the idea of the promising young man, that a talented man has a whole life ahead of himself and that a potential rumor could devastate his future. But why don't we talk about the promising young woman this way? Why don't we talk about the victims this way? This film takes great inspiration from the 2016 case, The People of California versus Brock Turner. For those who don't remember, Brock Turner raped a fellow Stanford student behind a trash can as she lay unconscious. The survivor, who initially went under the, the alias Emily Doe, has reclaimed her name, Chanel Miller, and released her victim impact statement to the public shortly after. I highly recommend anyone who hasn't read it or wants to reread it, go and read it. But I want to focus on one small excerpt from her speech. Miller addresses Turner about his claim of how he ruined his life that night. Quote, ruin a life, one life, you forgot about mine. Let me rephrase for you. I want to show people that one night of drinking can ruin two lives, mine and yours. End quote. For those of you who remember this case, you may remember the part that was repeated time and time again. Brock Turner was a student athlete who was at risk of losing his spot on the swimming team due to this case. This was reported on so much that Chanel Miller felt she had to release her victim statement in order to regain the control of the narrative. So why do I say this film is heavily influenced by this case? Well, think about the judge, or the relation between the judge and the dean from the movie. The judge presiding over the case, Aaron Persky, sentenced Turner to 6 months in jail, 3 years of probation, and a lifetime on the sex offender registration. Turner got out after 3 months due to good behavior. What was the reasoning behind this decision, you may ask? Judge Persky claimed a longer prison sentence would, quote, have had a severe impact on him. Remind you of anyone from the film? Okay, on to the death of Cassie. The death of Cassandra and why she had to die. Emerald Fennell only very briefly entertained any ending in which Cassie lived. She states, of course, when I first started writing it, like every person in the audience wanted it to end with her walking away with a burning cabin behind her and sirens in the distance, but then I just got in the room and it just didn't seem possible. Fennell said, it just didn't seem real at all. It seemed completely impossible and it seemed like a lie, she added. And I think it was really important that this whole movie is taking those tropes of the revenge thriller and hopefully sort of undercutting them or subverting them. All I think that really we want from this film, like this, is for her to cut off his balls and set him on fire. But then you leave and you never think about it again because suddenly you're in movie land. If you're honest, it felt important to me that the moment that a weapon was introduced, it was going to get turned on her. There's a reason women don't do what we see in the movies like this, which is put on a dress and get out an AK-47. There's so many reasons why women don't, but they just don't. And so it seemed to me that if I was in the room in a house full of men and as teeny as Carrie is, again, once referring to Cassie, there's just no way. And honestly, I agree with this notion. Sorry, end quote. It ended at there's just no way. And in my opinion, I agree with this notion. In my research, I found that many viewers dislike the ending and believe it to be unsatisfying or too tragic. I personally disagree with this view, although as a viewer, you are rooting for Cassie and are disappointed to see her die. This is what sets it apart from other rape revenge films. Justice is achieved, but it's not the ending we want to see. She doesn't walk out in her nurse outfit, having set the cabin on fire with all the men inside. There's not a gigantic explosion or an incredibly choreographed fight scene. So, coming to the end. So I leave you guys with one question. Is catharsis achieved? Cassie dies brutally and completely alone, but she has achieved the one thing in life she wanted. Nina is avenged, and she even ensures that her own death does not go unpunished. Is this a happy ending? Thank you.